Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cobby. Ladies and gentlemen and Cobby, welcome to the 2015 Bus Industry Annual Dinner, and we've had a great day today. We had two events running in parallel, the National Industrial Relations Seminar, which is always interesting when you've got a room full of IR practitioners, and not my favourite cup of tea, but they seem to enjoy themselves in there. And we had a Technical and Suppliers Summit, which is really the supply side of the industry, with over 100 people in that room. We also had the privilege today of having Erica Betts, the Minister for Industrial Relations, Brendan O'Connor, Shadow Minister for IR, speaking to the IR seminar, and Karen Andrews, the Parliamentary Sec for Industry and Science, speaking on behalf of Ian Macfarlane. So a good level of representation from government, and once again tonight we've got some special guests. Unfortunately, we've lost a few soldiers from the Senate who have been told they're staying into school till 10 o'clock tonight and can't make it. So we've had a bit of fun trying to rearrange the tables. But if you've got some spare seats, just it probably means they're not coming, and you can move around and mingle and spread your wings. But just a few acknowledgements of our guests, distinguished guests tonight. First of all, our Transport Spokesperson of Peoples, Michael McCormick, Parliamentary Secretary for Finance and a member for Riverina down the Wagga Way and Griffiths in your electorate, where I know you've already met Peter Ferris as one of your bus operators and taxi operators in your electorate, so we're going to be pushing your buttons, Michael. He speaks to all the passengers apparently on the buses. But Michael has agreed to come along and represent Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss tonight, who obviously, during a parliamentary sitting week, it's always difficult to get the big man, so we appreciate you coming along. Anthony Albanese, who's, I understand, doing a couple of dinners tonight, so he'll fly in and out. He'll do his usual song and dance and keep us all entertained. And not sure how long he'll stay. He said he was leaving last year, though, and he stayed for a fairly long time with Mr Patch after the event, so you never know with Albo, but he'll be here and we'll be hearing from him. Senator Janet Rice, the Green spokesperson for Transport, has obviously been caught up in the Senate, so she sent along her advisor from her office, Sam Drummond, and Sam will speak on behalf of the Greens. I'd also like to welcome from the ACT Alistair Coe. He's the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Transport. Welcome, Alistair. From the federal, we've got a number of federal members. So as you already know, John Cobb, the member for Calare, is here. John's an old friend of the industry and comes along and certainly makes sure that we have a good night. Darren Chester. Darren, thanks for coming along. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Defence and member for Gippsland, and appreciate your time. And Luke Howarth, the member for Petrie, who I'm not sure whether he's arrived, but not yet, but he's accepted. Also, welcome to David Anderson and Paul Redder. David's the Chairman of the National Transport Commission and Paul Redder's the Chief Executive Officer, so it's great to have you along. And of course, how could I forget our friends from the Parliamentary Friendship Group for Better Cities, which is a group of 11 national organisations that's set up a bipartisan parliamentary friendship group in the House. It's chaired by Jane Prentice, who's a Liberal member from Brisbane, Andrew Giles, from the member for Scullin in Melbourne, and Adam Bant, who is there, and they're the co-chairs of that group. But welcome to Hodgie from the Cyclists, and Rowan from the Heart Foundation, Cheryl and Deborah from the Council of Capital City Lord Mayors, and of course Alicia from the Railways. And Michael Kilgariff at last. It's great to have the CEO of the Australian Logistics Council along, who's and they're more and more closely looking at how our cities function and run, and what role passenger transport has to play, not just freight. So welcome to all of those guests. The themes for tonight's dinner, and in fact for our national conference, which will be held in Singapore this year, is moving people, connecting neighbourhoods. The Connected Neighbourhoods and 20-minute city concept is outlined in the latest publication produced by BIC, which is part of what we call our Moving People Solutions for Policy Thinkers series. And this is the document which was launched today. This will be sent out to key ministers, decision makers, policy makers and thinkers in the urban planning and transport space, and as I said, it's number 4 of a series of 6, which is really about trying to generate some thought and discussion out and about in relation to how we make our cities and regions function, how we move people in those, and what role public transport plays. From an industry perspective, the 20-minute city is about the important increased role that bus can make to connecting our neighbourhoods at the local level, and in doing so improve the livability and functions of our cities and major regions. We as an industry, the bus industry, operate very well as part of the whole trunk route public transport network. Sure, it could be improved in the most states, and we'd argue it needs to be improved, and the states have a responsibility for the delivery of public transport in Australia. That's definitely not a role for the federal government. We do see a role for the federal government, but it's not funding the delivery of the services, that's for sure. What is going on at the local level, however, is where government policies and investment or lack thereof have resulted in what I would call drive-in and drive-out suburbs at that local level, where the connections between our local communities and our neighbourhoods, public transport and buses in particular, which are the glues to our community, actually is where we see a big hole and a gap that can be focused on. The 20-minute city is about changing this. Our guest speaker tonight is Dr. Janet Stanley, and she's going to provide an insight into the 20-minute concept and where buses fit in the scheme of things. Janet is the Special Advisor to the BIC and the Bus Association Victoria on transport and social inclusion. Until recently, Dr. Stanley was Chief Research Officer for the Monash Sustainability Institute and has held senior positions in the Federal Government, the Australian Institute of Family Studies and the Brotherhood of St Lawrence. Janet will shortly take on the role of Visiting Professor at the University of Hiroshima and has been invited over there to talk to them about local transport, social inclusion, connecting our communities and sustainable transport. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Janet.